This is my love letter to Guild Wars 3 and the community in general, to tell you what I hope will be in Guild Wars 3 if it is indeed being developed as we speak. And I open the floor to you. What are you looking for in Guild Wars 3? Let me know below. I do know that a couple of developers do occasionally watch my content, so you never know, you could affect the future of the franchise. But before we begin, hey, I'm Fornex, welcome to my channel. Please do take a comfy seat, get something yummy to drink, and join me in some wild speculation and hopium for the future of the franchise. As we dive into my Daddy I Want a Pony list for Guild Wars 3 features, content, future direction. Starting with exploration as my topic. So I adore Guild Wars' exploration ethos. I love the deep, beautiful, wild maps that we get. I love the narrative storytelling happening on the maps. Going forward, I want them to lean into that. I would like multi-dimensional maps. What do I mean? So I would like almost 3 biomes of a sky area where we have mountain tops and a canopy. We have the ground area, which we traditionally inhabit, and then we have subterranean and aquatic zones. And I would love those maps to be continuous. I want as few load screens as is humanly possible. I do not want little squares of exploration. I do not want necessarily time-locked maps. I want the world to be open and wild and free and to feel like a real world, that I could get on my mount and go from one end to the other and just have glorious scenery around me. Now, of course, all this is subject to engine that they choose, but as few load screens as possible, please. Onto where we will be visiting. So we have the Tyria that we know, all the places that we have already been to, and depending on when they set the story of Guild Wars 3, we could see different types of world if they set the story of Guild Wars 3 back in the Guild Wars when humanity was tearing itself apart. Well, the world is going to look significantly different than if they decide to set it 500 years in the future, or 250 years, as they're quite fond of doing. I am open to it all, but most want, which is linked to narrative, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, is that the world feels like it is affected by my actions. So ideally, in this new open world, borders-free version of Tyria, we have a lot of phasing. So how I see the world depends on how far through or what narratives I've played. But this does, of course, come with drawbacks. However, I think that they are not insurmountable. Let's give you an example. If you have played through the complete story so far, there should be either a button on the map or an NPC you can talk to in the area where you can change the phasing of the map so that you can play with others. And also, you can, at the moment in Guild Wars 2, join people in different maps. And I think this functionality could be used to allow players to join you who are in a different phase of that map. Now, you will say, but spoilers. And I think it is perfectly reasonable to have a warning pop up to tell you you're going to jump into a part of the story that you have not played through, so spoilers ahead. Do you wish to continue? And if this is your 17th ult and you're just trying to get somewhere, or you just want to help your friend, I think that that's entirely reasonable and actually beneficial to the longevity of the game in order to do that. So I would like to have an effect on the world, free roaming maps with as few load screens as possible, and very expansive maps. High into the sky, deep into the bowels of the earth, under the ocean, to really feel like we're in a living, breathing Tyria. And not just Tyria. So, spoilers for Secrets of the Obscure Story. Actually, spoilers for all the stories going ahead, because I'm going to talk a lot about a lot of stuff. So we have been introduced to a mist realm with Naos. It is a demonic realm, perhaps you might describe it as, although it is called the Realm of Dreams. And I hope that the devs lean into this going forward in the franchise. We could visit the realm of the gods, we could visit the home world of the humans and see what actually drove them from it. We could visit any demonic realm. There are many, the realms of torment, although you could argue that they are god realms in themselves. But of course, the multiverse of the Mists gives the writers an opportunity to spin new worlds, new alien races into existence, like they did with the Cryptus. So the Mists are an opportunity that is a galaxy-wide, and I hope that the devs fully embrace that, and I hope that we get to see many, many, many realms and many stories of the Mists. I would say, however, that I'm entirely in love with how Naos is represented on the current map, and I hope that they give the Mists a more ethereal, unreal, not in Kansas anymore look in the new map system that they come up with. But when it comes to exploration, I don't think that we can ignore how paradigm shifting the mount system has been in Guild Wars 2 with its introduction in Path of Fire. It kind of rewrote the world. It changed how the development team created maps, changed how we interacted with the world in fundamental ways. And I think the lion's share of the community has really embraced it. And just imagine what Tyria would look like today if they'd had mounts at the very beginning of the game. The world would look vastly different. It would feel vastly different. I think that going forward in development of Guild Wars 3, they could take that integration further, and they could create some truly astonishing, beautiful, unique mechanics around the mount systems that I hope the game has. On to races. So originally you could only play as a human in the original franchise. Then with Guild Wars 2, you could play as a human, Norn, Sylvari, Char and Asura. Okay, but going forward, what do we want? Well, top of list and top of mind, dwarves, Tengu, Kodan, Lagos, please, please. What about more obscure races, like the Forgotten, like the Jinn? Could you play as a Golem or a Jade Tech entity? How about Crate? That would be a challenge. But look at the Jotun and the Centaurs, the Naga, even Shoya, maybe a step too far. But we have a wealth of races, including the Cryptus, and more created races like the Exalted, or the Forged, or corrupted races like the Branded, and the Destroyers, and the Icebrewed, the Mordrum, the Risen even. I am open to all this. Of course, my must-have is Lagos. Do you want them to create a new race, born from the Mists, entirely different creatures, cephalopods and all sorts? Let me know what playable races you want below. But I'm absolutely positive in Guild Wars 3, they need to go big with the races. Let's move on to narrative, because that's my jam, and I think that we can agree that there has been a bit of dropping the ball in terms of fleshed out characters and fully realised storylines of late. So my genuine hope is that there is a better balance found between the rigours and pressures of releasing content and protecting the world that the narrative team is creating and allowing time within the confines of a game for proper character development. I feel like we only ever brush over the surface, especially of villains. I feel like we need to have fully fleshed out villains, like they did with Balthazar. By the time we got to murder Balthazar, we really wanted him dead. He was a thorn in our side, and him exploding into a bloody mist was great. That was peak. And we need that kind of dedication, we need that kind of depth, we need that kind of lead-in with all the big bads so that we have that payoff. We deserve it as players, the game deserves it, the narrative deserves it, God, the writers deserve it. All their hard work making these extraordinary worlds, and it doesn't always translate, so I think that they need to have a focus on integrating the gameplay and the narrative so that we get cohesion, we get time, we get the story and the experience that we deserve. And in that light, I want to talk about who the writers are writing for. So the average age of an MMO player is about 35. So if you think about what a 35-year-old watches, well, I mean, I can talk about myself. I'm in love with Frank Herbert's imagination, his neo-feudalism in Dune, in the novels, in the old film, which was wild and wacky, in the new, beautiful, fantastic films. If you haven't watched them, they are astonishing. I also love science fiction and fantasy. Isaac Asimov, Gamel and Gaiman, and Robert Silverberg and Terry Pratchett, Le Guin and Atwood, and I feel like many MMOs have kind of forgotten who their target audience is. There's been a bit of a Disneyfication of the narrative, and I think it's very much missed the mark. Not to say that grown-up stories must be misery and suffering. You can have fun and still write to an adult audience. I think that's one of the major failings of Dragonflight, because it wasn't the foundation of the narrative, it wasn't the characters that they introduced, but it was the Disney delivery. and the childishness of it all, which I think just fell flat. They didn't give enough credence to the story. They weren't paying attention to who they were telling it to. So sincerely, more time for the story, more integration of the story, more integration of the narrative, which brings us back to the exploration element. I want to feel like my actions have an effect. I want to see the world change as I play through it, and I want to see the narrative affect the world. For example, in Divinity's Reach, at the moment, it is a very human-centric city. You wouldn't really necessarily know that there were other races, there were other cultures. It is very human-centric, and this is not how the world works. Even if you say that only human things can affect Divinity's Reach, only evolutions and changes in the narrative and the ethos and the culture of humans can change a human city. Okay, we'll take that limitation. Spoilers, obviously, but in the narrative, we have seen the departure of the human gods. They have literally abandoned humanity, all of them, without fail. And we've had one of their gods go completely rogue and try to kill everybody. And we've had the rising of the Zaitians and the Forged and the decimation of them as well. So, do you not think that that would have had an effect on Divinity's Reach? It would have had a paradigm-shifting effect on the religiosity, on the temples. It would have echoed and shattered through society. And yet, when we go to Divinity's Reach, we see nothing of it. We have seen the rise of a new cult with the ascension of Aurene. That would be reflected. Humans are a part of her worshippers, her tribe, her army. They are the new brotherhood of the dragon. She is the protector of Tyria. She would be supplanting all the other gods. And that would be manifest in culture and conversation and architecture and the changing of the guard at the temples. And we don't see any of that. And that is what I hope for in Guild Wars 3. To see the world change around you because of the narrative and the story. That is the hope. I also want to have that replayability still. I want the best of both worlds, and I want them to do this by using phasing. So that different points in history, different points in the story, the world looks different. And you can go back and revisit, just like with Lion's Arch. Phase shift back after you've got the achievement, and I'm fairly convinced that players will embrace the limitations of this and the nuances of this to have that real sense of immersion and causality on the maps. That is my hope. Do I think that there needs to be a time jump backwards or forwards? I'm happy with either. People often complain that there aren't enough Guild Wars in Guild Wars. We could go back, right back to before Doric petitioned the gods to take away humans' power, to the Guild Wars, when it was war and the human nations were taking chunks out of each other. However, we've had a lot of human stories, and I would be happy to just jump 50 years ahead and see where the world is. And it gives the writers an opportunity to really get their arms around the franchise, not to be forever reverential to the past and really just make some new history. But to be clear, keep the replayability of the story. I think that that is one of the strongest things. It takes me back. I'm planning to do a full replay of the story very soon, just so I can re-immerse myself and fall in love with the franchise again. I have played distinctly less of Soto than I have of other expansions. I've bounced off it a little bit, so I want to kind of fall in love with it again, because I do love this franchise and I love the narrative. Now, one of the things that I think that Guild Wars has never really leaned into, and I wish that it would, is class fantasy and class narratives. A great example of this would be Legion and the Order Halls. I played a huge amount of Legion. I play through a lot of Legion content even to this day, because I just enjoy it so much. It's so lore-rich, it's so class-centric, and it really gives you a sense of belonging. It places your abilities and your skills in the context of the world and its history, and I adore it. If you haven't done Mage questline, I highly recommend it for Legion. It is amazing, although the Shaman one is fantastic. The Paladin one is amazing. They're really, really good. If you play World of Warcraft for nothing else, playing through the narrative of Legion is amazing, and the raids are fantastic. Shilling for another game in a Guild Wars video, but I would love to see some of that specificity, some of that integration of player professions and the world happening in Guild Wars 3. with dedicated storylines and narratives, histories and legendary items and legendary people and mysteries, all of that rolled into a proper, cohesive, separate, specific class storyline. A beautiful, interesting story that kind of takes you by the hand, leads you through developing your class and understanding your class as well. I think you can't underestimate a good narrative, how that can hook people into their class. And I don't think that it should be exclusive to just combat classes. Final Fantasy does a fantastic job of giving interesting, fun narratives for crafting professions and gathering professions, making them real things. You feel like you're in the world, you feel like you have a job, you're part of a guild, you're helping people, you're filling orders, you're learning yourself, you're going out, you're exploring the world. It's great. I love it. It makes the world feel more alive, makes me feel more in it, and I do actually adore the fact that in Final Fantasy there's no limit. You can learn as many classes as you want, combat or otherwise, on your character, and you can just make this incredible, diverse character that you can do anything on. But now we're going to talk about gameplay and endgame stuff. So in terms of the combat, if you watch any of my content, you'll know that I pay lip service to it, but really I'm here for the shinies and the story. What I want to feel as a casual player is a sense of fun and freedom and movement, but purpose as well. I do raid occasionally in Guild Wars 2. I've completed all the achievements for my armor set, so I have done quite a bit of raiding in Guild Wars 2. I've done some achievements as well in raiding, and I generally like how the combat works. I like the fluidity, I like the paradigm shift of who tanks and who supports, and I think that's great. And I hope that they carry that forward. Would I be terribly upset if they introduced a hard trinity? No. If introducing a more rigid trinity allows the development team to create interesting, more easily balanced content, as in, group content, go for it. Let me know what you think below, but I'm fine with that. But my one hope is that they give each combat class profession its own sense of identity and purpose and narrative grounding, and keep the movement. Too many MMOs have you planted, rooted whilst in combat, and I love the freedom of Guild Wars and the fluidity of its combat and its motion, its movement generally, so please don't break that. That is all I ask. Onto the end game. I think that they should lean into their strength, which is making fantastic, bombastic, open world raid bosses. At the moment in Guild Wars 2, guilds can't spawn a number of raid bosses. I think that they need to lean into that. They should have open world bosses that have scaling difficulty levels. I think they need to lean into the world first ethos. They want to have world first titles. They should be dedicated loot trees with exceptional and awesome items. There's rare drop chances to keep people going back to these raid bosses. I think that they should have interesting strikes with this same scaling level of difficulty, bringing in Twitch, having these races to world first, driving a community and excitement and interest in the game that we all hopefully will love and adore if it's even half as good as Guild Wars 2. I think that they do actually though need to do more 5-man content. We have Fractals. It's a bit hit and miss because of the agony resistance required at the moment in Guild Wars 2. I feel like they need to take away arbitrary blocks to people engaging with content. I think a sliding scale of difficulty is enough without having an arbitrary blocker. I would rather there be actual dungeons associated with the story that progress the story, that you can run as a player who likes to play solo a lot with NPCs. There should be a story mode, then there should be a group mode for players who want a bit more of a challenge, then there can be harder and harder modes up until you're getting extraordinary gear and titles and achievements and all sorts of things. And I think that having that variability with not just spongy bosses, but adding more and more intricate mechanics to it is a great thing. Players love it. Players love sliding difficulties. And again, you can have that world first. You could set up tournaments of people running them and speed running them. There's a whole plethora of emergent gameplay that could come from the community around well thought out group content, which I feel like is just a bit lacking at the moment with Guild Wars 2, which I hope they will fix in Guild Wars 3. I do welcome single strike bosses. I do also think that they should have raids. However, above all that, when they decide what their endgame content is, they need to stick to it. We have picked this lane. We are going to deliver this content to you at this schedule, at this date, so that you can plan your gaming life, spare time, your free time, your hobby around it, and be consistent. And I think that Guild Wars 2 has been a testing ground, but when you're organizing group content around many people, you need to know what's coming so you can plan accordingly. And I feel like they need to have that consistency with Guild Wars 3. That's my thoughts. Also, I'm fine with the level cap being set a number, 60, fine. Just have people leveling to 60 or 80, pick a number. I'm okay if they want to ever increase that number. Personally, I prefer that we unlock new skills and abilities with experience rather than just grinding an arbitrary number. And I do like in Guild Wars 2 that we don't have a loot treadmill, that there is a point at which you cannot outgear the content. You get the best gear in the game that you can, and then everything else above that is player skill. And I think that they need to kind of emphasize that this is not a game for all the gear and no idea players. This is a game for players who are looking to have their skills tested. You cannot crush the content with numbers. You have to crush the content with your ability, with your cohesion as a party, with your tactics, not just number is bigger, number is better, which I think a lot of games suffer from. But that's just my opinion. Would you like to see an ever-increasing level cap? Do you want a loot treadmill? Do you feel like the game suffers because there isn't that continuous incentive to better your gear? Let me know what you think below. I'm sure the devs would appreciate your feedback. I want to talk a little bit about World v World and PvP, because I feel like they're the least loved children of the pantheon of game types. And I feel like it's a damn shame, because again, Guild Wars 2 and hopefully Guild Wars 3 will have such dynamic, enjoyable, skill-based gameplay that it's begging for competitive play. And especially for me, the hybrid in World v World of PvP and PvE, the raids that I've participated in World v World is just amazing. I love it. I love the sense of camaraderie. I would love to see the devs leaning into that and facilitating player tournaments and emergent, just like the races to world first, there could be leagues when it comes to player versus player and world versus world, and it could all be born from the players themselves. There's enough enthusiasm and interest. Even now in World v World, people are crying out to have this kind of content, to have this kind of ability, but they have been left to languish since Heart of Thorns. They haven't had a new map. You know, it's sad. So I hope that if they do have player versus player and world versus world reimagined in Guild Wars 3, I hope again there's the consistency, there's the support for emergent tournaments within the game itself and pushing out on Twitch again to get eyes on the game, to get enthusiasm, to get more people in. And yeah, it's picking a lane. Hopefully Guild Wars 2 has been the experimental phase in the franchise's history, and Guild Wars 3 will benefit from all that experimentation. Also, I want to quickly talk about specialist servers. So in many MMOs, you will have the ability to head over to a dedicated role-playing server or a dedicated PvP server or a PvP role-playing server. There are mashups of the like. I think that might be a nice idea to have a few servers for people who really want to dive into the role-playing aspect of the world or the competitive open world PvP of the world. Maybe just a tick box so that people can congregate together, like-minded people are bound together on different servers to participate in this kind of activity, especially for the role players, in a bit of peace. So now we've got the combat and the endgame wishlist out of the way, I wanted to talk about a bit of Fashion Wars. So as it stands at the moment in Guild Wars 2, changing our character's appearance is kind of blocked off, is hidden behind a microtransaction. Now, for those who take part in a lot of PvP or World v World, they will have transmutation charges to spare, and they will not experience this. But for players who like PvE content, it is very much a Fashion Wars tax going on. And everybody experiences the same issues when it comes to changing your character's hairstyle or modifying their face or modifying their body type. And I do not want this in Guild Wars 2. I think that it is detrimental to the community. I think it's detrimental to the game. And I do not want it, especially in Guild Wars 3. It's not in the community's best interests, to say the least. In terms of fashion, I think that they've got a lot right in Guild Wars 2. In terms of item collection and unlocking, in terms of being able to change your appearance on the fly, that's all great. But they need to get rid of that Fashion Wars tax. It is not good, it is not wanted, and everyone would make a lot more content about Fashion Wars if it wasn't so expensive to do so. And a quick note about player housing. Do I think that Guild Wars 2 should have player housing? Yes, I do, 100%. Do I think that Guild Wars 3 should have player housing? Yes, 100%. Do I think Guild Wars 3 should have guild halls? Sure, that would be fantastic. I love them. I'm sad that they stopped developing guild halls in Guild Wars 2, and I would love to see the return of that, and guild missions and guild group activities as well. I would love to see that evolved and continued and broadened and committed to. And the final topic I want to talk about is recompense for Guild Wars 2 players moving into Guild Wars 3, or basically a hall of monuments for Guild Wars 3. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the original campaigns, when it was announced that the old game was going to be put on maintenance mode and Guild Wars 2 was going to be a thing, they set up a system of achievements that players could participate in the old world to get rewards in the new. So you could unlock skins that were all free to apply, no fashion tax. You could get unique combat pets and unique miniatures and unique armors that the only place in the game that you can get them is by playing the content in the original campaigns. And you can still do that. You can still buy Guild Wars, the original games, play through them, get the achievements, link your Guild Wars 1 account to your Guild Wars 2 account, and unlock all those skins in the Hall of Monuments. Do I think that we will see that equivalent in Guild Wars 3? Well, it would make sense. I think it is entirely possible. I think that there has to be some compensation for players who have poured a huge amount of real-world money into skins for mounts, into skins for their characters, into dance books, and also just the time, the hours and hours that people have put into playing the game, into unlocking legendary armor, into their guilds. People have invested heavily, both emotionally and financially, and I feel like there should be some acknowledgement, there should be some titles and skins and special yummy bits and pieces for them. I wholeheartedly support that. Please let me know what you would like to be rewarded for depending on what you've done in Guild Wars 2. What titles, what skins, minis, the whole thing. Let me know what you think would be appropriate recompense for your time and your effort. Let me know what you want. This is my wish list. If they are developing this game, this is a golden opportunity to share with them what's really important. And whilst you're down there, if you're just here for a bit of Guild Wars gossip and you haven't jumped in and tried the game, there are links below to the free-to-play game and all its expansions, including Soto, below. Thanks to the generosity of Anet and their partner program. Using any of these referral links directly supports my channel, but costs you not a penny more, and I am making this content thanks to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon and Subscribestar. I could not do it without them. They keep the lights on here even when the YouTube algorithm hates me. They keep my spirits up quite a lot. And if you support my content directly, you get access to a private patrons Discord channel where you can chat with me. I do lurk there and I do answer any and all questions posed. And of course you can make content suggestions there as well. But I think I've rambled about Guild Wars 3 long enough. I will release you from this video. Go have fun. And until next time, please stay safe, stay awesome, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.